Hello everybody and welcome to another Maya tutorial. Today I am going to be showing you the basics of UV mapping and kind of how it works and how to lay out simple UVs. Alright, so first off I'm just going to make a cube. Actually, no, I'm going to make a sphere first. Okay. I'm going to hit 5 to shade the cube. Okay, so now I need to open up the UV texture editor. There should be a control down here for it, where it splits the window in half. Or there you can open up a separate window here, and this should be in your polygon shelf by default for the half window. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is a UV map of this sphere. If I turn on borders, as you can see, it highlights the edges, the border edges of the UV. But it also highlights it on the shape. As you can see, this edge here is thicker than the other edges. So this is where it's sewing, well, where it cut it apart so it could unwrap it. So if I went and I selected this face, for instance, it's on this side, this face should be on this side. Okay, so, and go back to object mode. Okay, so if you go to UV mode, it creates all these nice little brown dots. If you select one, it corresponds with a position on the UV map. So all it is just taking the surface, kind of cutting it apart, and unwrapping it and flattening it out. This way you can put 2D images on 3D objects. So if I select those, it's selecting those and those because it's through the object. Okay. So now let's see what happens when we put a shader on it. Give us a practical application. So I'm just going to come over here to my hyper shader, and I'm going to make a Fong. I'm going to middle click and drag it on my shape. Right click on object mode. Set my Fong. Go to my attribute editor. And change, click the little checkered box here, and I'm going to put checker pattern on it and turn on textures. So as you can see, it's mapping on squares onto the surface of our shape. So if I select the shape, it shows us where these squares are based on the shape. And this is giving us an idea of how it's mapping on. If you can see, the top ones are distorting going to a point because the size is on here is not the same as the size on here, and that's creating distortion. Anytime a square is represented different size between the two objects, is going to be distorted in some way. So let's try a different shape. So if we select a cube, we're going to select a cube and then middle click and drag our shader onto it. As you can see, it kind of unfolded the cube like you used to do when you were learning geometry. You'd get a piece of paper and you'd cut it into a T shape, and then you'd fold it into a cube shape. And each of these represents a side of the cube. So that's that side, and then that side. It starts at the front. This is the front. This is the right, this is the left, top, back, and bottom. So if you kind of took all this, cut it apart at the edges, and unfolded it, it would look like this. And so you can see there's exactly 4 squares in every cube face, and it's represented as such. Okay, so what happens when we do a more non-standard object like a torus? Make our torus here. As you can see, it's taken it and it's created all these squares of totally equal length, which is not going to give us a very accurate map because these squares are close to the same size as these, but these faces are definitely not, and so it's stretching it really bad on this outside edge, and it gets exponentially less as it works its way in. So if I was to select some UVs and scale these around, you're going to see our maps change. So if I scale it down, it makes the squares bigger because there's less of the black and white squares to go in more of the faces. So it's scaling up the texture by scaling down the UVs. I know it's kind of backwards, but... And then if I pull it out, it adds squares to it. So now on the outside, we're getting something close to an actual square, but on the inside, it's very squished now. So it's harder to map round objects than it is square objects, because square objects, you can just break apart the individual faces. If I was to break apart all the individual faces for this, you know, there's 400 different faces that I'd have to deal with, as well as a cube only has 6. Okay, so the problem happens when we have an object and we start extruding it. The extrusions do not show up on the map. So if I extrude this, pull it up, extrude this, pull it sideways, pull this out, pull it out like so. So we have this kind of funny looking shape. As you can see, it did not change our map whatsoever. So if I drag texture onto here, it is actually only showing texture on the original sides. So all these new sides right here, whoops, are being shown, but they're actually totally flat. They're being shown from the top. So if I was to go like this, they're being shown like this. So you can't actually see them. There's only the very top edge. And same with these, aren't even being shown at all. So we have this issue, and it's fixable. So if we go back to object mode, and go to create UVs, and we do an automatic map, it's going to take and it's going to break apart our shape into separate faces. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, so the problem with this is it's like, oh, it's all well and good now, there won't be any distortion, it's perfect. No, because if we want, say, our shape to continue from this square to this square, as you can see, they are across the map from each other. So it would be really hard to correlate the two of those. So what you can do is if you go to the edge and select the edge that they share, it highlights it for you, and you hit this move and sew tool, it'll move them together. So I am going to move this out so we can get a better view of it. These pieces around. And all I'm doing is selecting one UV and then shift greater than symbol to grow my selection, and it only goes to the edge of the UVs when working with UVs. Okay, so if I select this edge, where does this edge get shared? Up here. So if we move and sew those together, you can see it's connecting together in a line. Move this out here. And then go to this edge, select this edge, and move and sew that, and it was this piece. However, we have a problem now, because this piece shares an edge right here. So if we move and sew that, it creates this weird triangle when it tries to recalculate the geometry, which is rarely what we want. So you have to watch out for edges like this. You can't connect those. If this edge is more important than this edge, then you would trim it. You would cut it apart here and then trim it together there. So let's finish sewing this together. Moving so we got that piece. This piece is probably going to over up there, and so that, and another one, and another one, and so that one, and if we sew that one, aha! So the shared sides were over there, so this isn't going to create a very nice map for us. So we're going to have to leave those unsewn. I'm going to sew those together. Where does this piece go? It goes right here. So move and sew that. And move and sew that. So as you can see, this is the 2D representation of this 3D shape. Takes it and unfolds it all. And this is what it ends up looking like. So you can get really complicated maps really fast, and it can be sort of hard to handle at times. The good thing is you can always find a way to map it so that it looks good. The bad part is that sometimes that takes a really long time. I'll be going over more UVs, and we'll just be doing very simple UVs. We won't have to do anything complicated, like nothing nearly as complicated as this. We're just going to be mapping on spheres, cylinders, and other things like that. So you don't have to worry too much about this, but I just want to kind of introduce you and give you an idea of what UVs are and how they react and why they're useful. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you all in my next video.